Hi guys, welcome back to another video, and in this one we're going to be taking a look at the gearbox. I still have a massive issue with the loose receiver on the bottom of this thing, but I've sent an email to Silverback and we'll see what they come back with. If it's anything to go by, what my experience was with my TAC 41, it's like going to be getting blood out of a stone, and they'll probably say you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. Instead of just taking the feedback and going, yes, that's right, that's within tolerance, or no, that's out of tolerance and we need to get it sorted. But it really is the worst part on the rifle. And like I said in my last video, it probably doesn't come across on camera, but when you're holding the rifle as you would shoot it, you can actually feel the receiver like notched to either side, so it's just a pain. But first of all, what we're going to do, we're going to pop the 3 pins out here. We're going to use the tool that Silverback give us. So we've got 1, and what I've found is just, if you do it on the side first, just to start it like that, you're not sort of pushing down and can slip off. 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to pop the rifle onto its top rail there so it holds it. Make sure the pins are retracted, and then we're just going to lift the lower receiver off. And like I said in my last video, I went back and watched the footage. These were actually broken. It wasn't caused by me putting the magazine in, and if you watch that video carefully, you'll see these were broken before it was split. What would be nice is you wouldn't not having to take apart the complete rifle lower to put a battery in. It's going to be a pain on the field. So once that is done, we're just going to take off these covers, because once we remove this screw, the covers are going to fall off anyway. So we're going to take 1 and then 2, and then we're going to be using a Torx 20 or a T20. You'll see there we've got 1 tab, the rear plate, we've got the pin to extract, which is held in by a little pin spring. So what we're going to do, we're going to get some needle nose pliers. Got some here, and we're just going to grab the spring and pull it off the pin like that. Keep that nice and safe. We can extract the pin. Going to flip it round. T20 still. Probably should have pulled the handguard and the barrel off to do this. It probably would have been a lot easier. Keeping everything in frame. Gonna pull that mounting bracket off, and then before you do anything else, we need to pull the data cable off the front of the gearbox there. After that's been pulled off, we can extract the gearbox, and the gearbox is now out of the rifle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this bench up. We're just going to push these parts to one side, but I'm going to take the upper and lower receiver and pop them out of the way so we can focus on the gearbox. They do have a couple of videos out there showing you how to do the spring, how to change the O-ring on the piston. You can see here how much the cylinder's ported. It's quite a lot. So you're only getting airflow from here. I'm not sure whether there's another, sort of 20-30% more airflow we can get out of that. Time will tell when they reveal those bits. And what's weird is all the screws are accounted for, but we've got an extra screw. So where's that from? So I have removed 4 of these countersunk Torx 20 bits. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. I've only removed 4 screws. That was stuck to the motor, like so. So where has that screw come from? Perhaps it's from the factory. Who knows? The interesting thing, however, we'll keep that as a spare maybe. I've heard quite a few stories of people getting random screws in the inside the rifle, so it's probably not something too uncommon. But what we can actually do, this is the PCB to switch the gun to semi only, and we can actually use this as a way of cycling the gearbox with it not being in the rifle. So what we'll do is we'll take this, make sure it's inserted carefully, like so. We have our 11.1 LiPo battery. I still haven't found a battery that fits the MDR-X. Everywhere that seems to have a size that might work is out of stock. And we can press this button. The timing of that is so weird. So you'll have seen that, or if you watch closely, the rifle's cycling in different, and it's pausing in different steps. Let me try another battery. Might be this one's low, who knows? We've got another one here. Let's try it again. I did experience this the other day. So we'll hold the gearbox so it doesn't vibrate on the bench. That's absolutely fine. Must be that battery's below it. I know this has LiPo protection, you know, sort of under voltage protection. That's why they give you the PCB jumper. What I might do, just for peace of mind, because I don't want to experience that crap when I'm out in a field. So probably what I'll do when I'm fielding this, I'll just put the PCB jumper. You put it on the bottom 2 pins. One thing I will say about this gearbox as well is those pins are quite sharp, and it's where all the wires are. So I think once that PCB jumper's in, we're going to put something there to stop potentially these wires pushing on those pins, damaging the pins, or the pins damaging the wires. So we're going to pull this board out just to keep it nice and safe. And let's take a look at this gearbox. So that looks like the same T20. And we got, yep, that's one on the front. And one to the rear. So we have 2 countersunk T20 screws. These are stainless, they're both the same length. And we can pull this cylinder apart. What we'll do, we'll pop the spring out. Do we have a 5mm? We've got one in the packaging anyway, so let's use the one that came with the rifle. Be able to better see the thing I was explaining in the video the other day. Spring comes out. Just a normal AG spring. This one feels quite light. Got a bearing spring guide there. Very simple design. We've got this piece with 3 screws on, which are your locking screws. We've got the bearing. We've got the spring guide, and then there's 1 bolt keeping that whole assembly together. Be able to look in the back of the cylinder here, and we'll have to see about getting this off. You'll need an adjustable spanner to loosen the cylinder head. I imagine they'll sell their own tool for it, and that will pull the piston out. And this is how the system works, much like a Systema. You've got the piston head can actually move separate to the piston, and it all comes back like this. You'll see it's pulling back the nozzle. When it gets to a certain point, that contact will break. That's what lets your nozzle go forward and feed the round. The piston then comes back in the cylinder, loads up the air, comes back, fires, and then that clips back onto the nozzle. Pretty much exactly the same as how the Systema cylinders work. This is obviously just much more of a beefed up version of the same thing. So we have the gearbox left over here. So we'll be seeing what we can do on that in terms of the shimming. We can pop the motor connectors off. That looks like a 2.5 or a 3mm, so let's see. Might actually be a 2. It's got 2.5. So we're going to remove these 3 screws. We can remove the board. I like that's all self-contained, and you can literally pull it off and then work on the rest of the gearbox without, you know, potentially damaging anything on that. So we've got the motor mount here, which is a size up, so we need a 3. Extremely strong magnets on that motor, which is good. Pull that bracket screw off. Then we've got the motor bracket, and then we've got the motor itself, which is a 28 turns per armature motor. I'm just placing everything down as it's come off so it goes back in the same way. We've got some more screws on the gearbox there. So it looks like that's still a 3. So we have 1, and 2. Then we can split the casing. We've got some very big bearings on this. Got the reversal latch, and then we've got the 3 gears. So if we pop this back together, the mesh doesn't sound that bad. Seems like nice and free moving. So the scratchiness that we could be hearing could be from the pinion to the bevel gear, so it could just be a motor adjustment. If that's the case, I'd be very happy indeed. See the case in here, got these huge bearings. It's a very good choice from Silverback. The gears don't look bad at all. They are cast or sintered, whichever you want to phrase you want to call it. They're not machined, and that is all that's to the gearbox. So make sure I get that shim back on the gear. Just checking that it's sitting in place properly. I'll try. Not a lot of play between that gear at all. (18:1) ratio gears. You've of course got that huge magnet on the sector gear, which is one the sensor uses to detect where the gearbox is. So this would be an extremely easy gearbox to shim. If it's needing a shim, it's going to be an extremely easy gearbox to service. Does sit awfully close to the gears, that does. you'll see the anti-reversal. Is it an anti-reversal latch? It kind of looks that way. Yeah. So if this was under tension, what you could potentially do is press this to relieve tension in the gearbox. But each time I've tried it, the gearbox has never been under tension. So what that means is the gearbox is always at rest after it's been fired, which is a good thing. It means the timing of the gearbox is correct. Pop this back together now. We've got two 3mm screws, bolts, whatever you want to call them. We've got the motor, which when I pulled it out, the writing was on the lower side. We've got the motor housing, and then we're going to try and hold this together while we screw this back down. There's one. We'll flip it around. Pop the other one in. As far as I know, no one's put out any videos of the internal parts of the gearbox. If they have, apologise, but it's very simple, very easy to take apart, very easy to maintain. They have put a lot of thought into this, where a lot, and I mean a lot, of airsoft companies don't. They'll just slap it together, and usually it's the end user that has to struggle. So I think I have seen someone already use a different gear that they installed a magnet onto. 18:1 is the usual ratio. It's not high torque, sort of in the middle. So it's very cool indeed. We could spin this up, see if we can locate where that nasty noise is coming from. Let's pop the battery on and we'll see if it turns. You can kind of hear that scratchiness, so let's see. Can we wind that out slightly? Still sounds scratchy. Doesn't really seem to get any better. What that usually means, especially with other gearboxes from different manufacturers, is that the bevel gear has been shimmed too low, and what that means is no matter where the setting of the pinion gear is, you can't get any adjustment on there. It's always too tight. So what I would probably say to start with the bevel gear and just shim that out again slightly. We'll have to have a look at that. So I'm going to have a quick look at this gearbox while I'm not filming, just see if I can see anything, and then I'll be back once I've had a little bit of a play with it. Okay, I've been messing around with this gearbox and I've tried many different things. Setting the motor height didn't seem to change anything. It was just getting worse no matter what way you turned it. I found this SHS motor out of one of my AKs, my LCTs. So I thought, let's put that in. Put this in, and it did sound better. However, when using this motor, it'd bat as the single shot resetting, then every now and again it'd go burr. Sorry for the crude noise there, but it basically just wound slowly, like it really wasn't happy about something. So I've put the motor back in, and you'll hear the noise. Now listen to this. See how much better that sounds? Why do you think that is? What am I doing here in this? What I suggest is pause the video, head down to the comments below and type what you think it is. No cheating. I'll wait for you. And then now you're back. What I'm actually doing is you'll see the motor sits on an angle in the housing. So the flat edge of the gearbox and the flat edge of the motor, you see how the motor's slightly tilted that way. So something's forcing the motor down, which is the bevel gear. Now I can't actually shim the bevel gear any higher. It's got one tiny shim there. If I take that out, then it starts rubbing on the gearbox. So there's not really much I can do about that. But all I'm doing is I fire it. So I'm firing it as normal. Sounds horrific. If I apply pressure to the motor like that, hard to do with one hand, but I apply a little bit of pressure. How much smoother does that sound? So what's happening is the bevel gear is sat too low. So the bevel gear, crude analogy, you've got the angle of the bevel gear and you've got the angle of the pinion coming in, and the perfect mesh is when you set your height of your motor. Now what happens is if the bevel gear is too low, as you come in with the motor, you can't actually adjust it out far enough, and because of the angle you can't just keep winding the motor out, because what will happen is only the sort of the back or the top of the teeth are engaging with the motor, which is why the noise sounds worse. So what you actually need to do is you need to raise the bevel gear up, and then the motor can come in and have a nice mesh, and that is the key. So the bevel gear is sat too low to the gearbox. I'm not sure whether we can skim maybe the bevel gear off, just skim a little bit of material and bring it up slightly. That's probably what I'm going to have to do. Not easy if you don't have access to specialist tools like lathes and such, but that is the problem, and that is why when we look at the gearbox, the bevel gear is actually forcing pressure on the motor, causing it to rotate like this, because the bevel gear is too far down. And the reason why I thought it was this, and my theory of why that was so accurate, is because Aries suffer with this on all their platforms. Usually they don't suffer as much on their Pro line gearboxes. I don't know whether they just spend a bit more time shimming those gearboxes, but the sports line Aries stuff, they sound scratchy, and if you take the gearbox apart and you just shim the bevel gear up slightly, the gearbox will sound 10 times smoother. That's exactly what's happening with this gearbox casing. So I'm going to have a look, do some fine tuning, maybe skim that bevel gear, bring it up slightly, and I think we're going to have a very, very sweet sounding gearbox. But I've found the problem. I've found the issue with the gearbox, and just to show you again, if you're going to be able to see this, you can see this flat edge is just higher on this side. So that is the root of the problem, and I can actually push it down by hand. And again, the motors are loose in the housing, so there's not much support there. So what we'd have to do is sort of, if we try and shim it down, it's obviously going to kink the motor up. So the issue is the bevel gear. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope what I've said to you makes some kind of sense, and I'm going to have to pop this reverse latch back in as well. I'm going to reassemble this thing now. I'm going to have in fact, to be honest, I'm probably going to leave it apart, get this part on the lathe, maybe just skim it down a little bit, mess about with some shims, fine tune it. Perhaps it's something we can offer as a service on the website, fine tuning for your Silverback MDR. Maybe that's something we'll look to in the future. But this is just where the key, the sort of more niche services you're going to find are going to benefit you. But if you're tech savvy and you want to try this yourself, by all means do so. I hope this has helped you if you're taking apart your MDR gearbox. Thank you very much for tuning into this video, and I'll see you in the next one.